Hi, it is a privilege to welcome you to Stand Up and Redo. It is a soulful, honest podcast hosted by me, Petra Demuse, a woman over 50 who is navigating life's most tender transitions with courage and grace. I have weathered the storms of 2 divorces, raised children into adults, embraced the joy of grandchildren, and learned, perhaps for the first time, how to stand comfortably in my own solitude. Each episode explores the profound wisdom that comes with age, the lessons etched in heartache, the beauty found in unexpected places, the laughter that bubbles up in the quiet, and the peace that settles when we stop running from ourselves. With reflections on love, loss, aging, happiness, and the sacredness of this one wild and precious life, Stand Up and Redo is a companion for anyone who's learning to live fully after everything they thought would last has changed. This is a space for late bloomers, deep feelers, and fierce survivors. Come for the comfort, stay for the truth, and leave a little lighter each time. Hi, I just listened to Stand Up and Redo Part 3 about living without addiction. And when I was listening, I realized how harsh and cold it might sound to some people. But what I want to tell you is upcoming this podcast, this particular episode, is not going to tell you how to take away the pain and hurt from loving someone who is suffering from addiction and worrying about them. I can tell you I did that. I tossed and I turned, and I still do at times, and worried about the other person who I loved. This podcast is not going to take that away, and I wish it could. And another one in the future might be about something like that. It might be about how to manage pain more. I do have one about the pain of a breakup, which gives you some skill sets to manage pain. But this particular episode is about empowerment. It's about being a woman terrified and alone, really. Even though she had a lot of support, you really do feel alone. And I'll be honest, it's about empowerment. So when you listen, know that this is something that if you are trying to survive really on your own, this is how I did it. And, I might, again, have had different resources than you have and been in a different situation. But just know that that's what this episode is about. And it's not going to take away feelings of pain and hurt. And I went through those too often, just so you know. And that was actually the hardest part of it all. But this is about empowerment. And I hope that it does help you. Thank you. Welcome again to Stand Up and Redo. And I am elated that you're here because this part 3 of living with addiction or living after addiction, this one is really for you. It's really about you if you're making a decision whether to stay or to leave the person who is suffering from addiction. I want to go back to my story, and if you remember, of course, I spoke about having 3 children, and my children were little when I was with a person who was suffering from addiction. And that time, at that age, I can tell you if I didn't have children, I believe, you never really know till you're in the situation, right? Well, I believe I would have stayed with him much longer. And it's odd because you think children are kind of maybe that bracket that holds you together, or the reason that you would stay because you're like, you don't want to have a broken family with 3 children. But I can tell you, and it's not their fault. You say it's not your fault that we got divorced. It wasn't their fault that we got divorced. It was the person who was suffering from addiction's fault and who was unable at that time to get help. But the reason I did leave was because I had 3 children. And I don't want to say the reason I left. The reason I left at that time was because I had 3 children. If I didn't, I can say I believe I would have stayed a little longer. I would have tried a little harder. I would have been a little bit more nasty and mean and maybe tried to be bossy and tried to micromanage our marriage and him a little more to see if I could help him. But I also learned later, much later, going to counseling, that that doesn't help an addict. If you're bossy and you yell, it might even make it worse, because I was in another situation with a man who was struggling later. And when I went to counseling afterwards, I blamed myself for his addiction, which I truly blamed myself. Now, the first relationship I told you about, where I'm going to explain leaving, I didn't blame myself at that time. I don't know. I really didn't. I blamed circumstances, situation, and, and the person at that time. But I didn't necessarily blame myself. The second time, I kept reevaluating how I could have done things differently. And the second time, that person passed away. So after that person passed away that I had a relationship with, which was many, many years later, many than the story I'm referring to about leaving the addict, I did blame myself, but I don't now. It's weird. Oh my goodness, that's so confusing for people. And if you haven't listened to the first two episodes, you might be really confused right now. So, again, this episode is about making a choice to live after addiction, meaning I was a person who was living with an addict who decided to move away from that addict, get out of that relationship, and live a life without being surrounded by addiction. Now, the thing about this episode is it's to help you if you're in that situation, or just for you to hear my story and relate to it if you've been in that position yourself and you've had to make decisions yourself in the past, and just to help you feel supported and to help you know that there are other people that have been through what you've been through, or even what you're going through. And I feel like my entry point to this episode is scattered. It's scattered, I know, but this is a really hard topic. And honestly, this third episode I was putting off. I did the other two episodes a long, long time ago. And this is the one that's going to be the hardest for me, because I'm not just telling stories. I'm talking about feelings more and emotions. And I'm going to tell you, try not to say, you should do this and you should do that and you need to do this or try this. I'm going to tell you simply to think about my story and think about my thought process. And I want to be sensitive to you, because everyone isn't like me. There are people who would do things differently than I did them, and there's also people who are stronger than me. There's people who are weaker than me, or who have less resources, or people who have more resources than I did. It sounds like I had a lot of resources, and with all honesty, now that I think back, I had a lot of support. I really had a lot of support. But I also had a strong will and a strong desire to take care of three children and to give them the best life that I could give them, and the safest life that I could give those three children. So we'll start off by the realization that I had to leave. Like I said, when you listen to the first two podcasts, there's a cycle that you go through. And for me, my cycle in finding out that my person was an addict, that I felt safe with him. He was a hardworking man. We had bought a couple properties together. We were really a fierce, hardworking couple. We had visions for our future. We had three really intelligent, bright, brilliant children, all all super smart, which is a blessing from God. Not to say they didn't have their struggles through life. I know I'm making it sound like there were no struggles, but there were at times with the kids, especially after I separated, because they were angry at me and mad at me. And also, they went through their own struggles of being in a divorced marriage, a home that had a dad and a mom. And, their dad loved them to a home that just had a mom, literally just had a mom. So, excuse me for coughing. I'm so sorry. I'll edit that out. But okay, so we're going to go back, right? We're going to go back to the story, and I do ask you maybe to listen to part one and part two if you haven't yet, and then turn this one on. But this is part three of living with addiction or living without addiction. The realization was I found drugs scattered all throughout my house. I was talking to my best friend, and we'll just call her M at the time. M said, I was laying in the hammock in my backyard and I felt a little defeated. I had been trying to figure out if he was using again and had some stuff happen and knew that he had always, I didn't know if he was because he had gone to rehab, an outpatient rehab, but I felt suspicion again. And she said, you need to stop basically having blinders on. You need to get in your house and tear it apart. You need to look to see if there's drugs in your house. And I'm like, what? In my house? There aren't drugs in my house. Well, I decided to go into the garage where I thought if he was going to hide drugs is where he would hide them. And we had put cabinetry into the garage. So the garage had like cabinets up top to store stuff in. And I got like a high ladder. And I thought, well, he's probably going to put them where the kids can't get to them. I mean, I just started thinking logically, climbed up on the top of the counter and got with my little hands, well, not my little hands, my big hands, up on top of the cabinetry. And we had all these really cool decorations up there. Like I said, my ex-husband was a fisherman, so he had all these big, beautiful conch shells along the top. It's some beautiful old glassware like that you would catch on the dredge, real old glass bottles and stuff. And it was kind of like our decor place up there, and it was real pretty up there. Not pretty, but had our collection of fishing stuff up there. So I started flipping over the conch shells, and inside the conch shells found some pills called Klonopin. Then found all kinds. I can't even describe all the things I found up there. Multiple pills, multiple look like liquid, some kind of liquid drug. I wonder often if that was methadone. I don't know what that was. I don't know, but there was a buffet, a buffet of drugs. So I just got this. You go into like, didn't cry. It was the weirdest experience. I went into just like a zombie state. It was like, and I wasn't like a zombie because I was thinking sharply. It was just logic. I went into a logical place in my brain. And you heard about, if you listened to the first two episodes, you would hear about the passion and the anger and the frustration that I went through, and it just built up and built up, and it turned that. I always hear this expression, and I don't even know if it's true, but I actually do believe it's true because it's happened to me multiple times in my life. Depression is anger turned inward, or depression is stress turned inward. So I think of anger and stress, are this intense. I mean, stress can be anything. Stress can be good and bad, but I think of anger and frustration and just stress and intensity. And then imagine turning all that inward, and then what's left is just depression. And I've had
depression a few times in my life, maybe really real depression, and I don't think I was never treated for it either, but I get this way. After I had my daughter Julia, um, I was working full-time 13-hour shifts and doing extra ones to make money when we were struggling financially, and I had two and three, then three kids, and but after I had Julia, I only had two kids. But I remember after little Julia was born, I was working full time, breastfeeding, taking care of two babies who had energy. My girls had more energy than I felt like most people's children, even some of the boys. Um, but I was exhausted, and I remember being stressed. Coming home, my heart rate was like 130, trying to get them to the daycare, trying to get to work, coming home, trying to cook dinner, trying to clean up, trying to get them in bed. And I remember I had such stress that I turned it inward and I got very, very depressed. I would just sit in the rocking chair on the weekends with the two girls and they would play on the floor and I would just sit there and like stare at the wall. Um, so I remember going through that depression once. And I think this was another time that I went through a little bit of depression, but didn't debilitate me. It just, I don't want to say made me able to function, but I had gone through so much stress in this situation with the drugs that finally I just became numb, like numb. And my emotions were like, I don't want to say gone. I definitely had emotion for sure, but I just thought logically. And you do get to a point where like like I said, I didn't feel like I had a choice to leave. I thought I have three children. My children are not going to be even taken away from me for one night. So I made the decision to live after addiction. So the decision's made. Wow. Whoop, there it is. No, if you're a mom or a man in a relationship with a wife, I mean, it doesn't have to be a female, it could be a husband and wife situation. It could be, okay, I'm going to really ask you to stretch and take my story, even though I'm telling you a story about a husband and wife, and think about it as a mother and a son, or think about it as two siblings, or think about it as a friend. Just reverse, just take this, think about you know, you with your friend, watching them just do drugs, do drugs, do drugs, isn't saving their life. You might think you are, but they could be in your home, living in your house, and overdose in your bedroom just as easily as they could in a hotel room or a street. You're making it comfortable for them to do it. That's all. You're making them feel comfortable when they're high, but they're still risking killing themselves. So, there you go. That's a little hard for some people to hear, probably, but it's true. And I'm speaking from my thought process at that time was to protect the children. And I also took a thought process, and my thought process was I am not a victim. Nope, I am not a victim. And I am going to fix this situation. And I had to analyze what I was going to do. I knew if I stayed in Cape May County, where I lived, that I was going to be the support person for, and this is really hard to say too, but his mom, his stepmom, and his dad were amazing people. I love them so much. And I know they helped me so much through time in my life. Even at this time, they were helping me because they were afraid of their son being an addict around the kids too. But either way, the thing was, I knew if I stayed in Cape May County, I knew for one thing, I'd see not even just him all over town because I wasn't as worried about seeing him because he pretty much, I don't know what he was going to do at that time. Um, but I was more worried about his parents were constantly um, worried about him, and it was hard. after I asked him to leave. So I found all the drugs in the house, and I think he came home, and I just told him he had to leave the house. And he did leave the house. He went, and that's when he left. And that whole thing that you heard in part one, where the money and everything was just going, going, going. Well, that's when, no, that's not true. This is after the money. I think he knew he had to leave the house. I had already been through all that money stuff. I'm sorry that again, I'm getting my timeline mixed up, but he knew he had to leave because he also didn't want, I can tell you, he wasn't a bad person, at least, and he loved me and he loved his three kids. And I feel like he knew he had to leave because his kids shouldn't be around that. Truly know that he didn't even question it. Plus, I watched him spiral down, which was heartbreaking because I thought that it might be his rock bottom, like I said, and I thought, well, when he left, things might get better for him. I knew that if they did, it would be a process for us to heal our relationship. It wouldn't be like he was going to come back tomorrow to the house and say, guess what? I'm going to apply to rehab and go away, because I'd already been through addiction with a lot of people and knew that's not how it works. I wasn't that naive, and maybe another person would be that naive, but I wasn't at that point. I knew that healing from addiction is a process. So, again, let's go back to the statement of I was not a victim. I was going to be the fixer for my children. So I had a nursing job in the hospital there, and I knew I could get a nursing job in another, I knew I could get a nursing job. Now I had to figure out where I was going to move. I knew in my heart we were going to get divorced. I went and I um, applied for divorce or whatever, or whatever. I don't think it's applied for divorce. I don't know. Filed for divorce. I went and filed for divorce. Um, and then what happened was I had to figure out what I was going to do. I knew I didn't want to live in that home because that home was actually owned by his father, and we were renting that house from his father. We owned a little home that another lady lived in. I rented to a woman who was a little bit lower income, and we rented from her for many years this house that we had bought in the villas. And I knew I needed to get out of that house. And it wasn't that his parents weren't lovely people who loved me and the kids, because that was another thing. They loved the children so much. I didn't want to move too far away. Really wanted myself, selfishly, to move down to the Carolinas, down to like South Carolina or North Carolina, and be warm and be near the beach and the mountains, and just, I knew in my heart that's where I wanted to move, but I also knew that was 10 hours away, and I needed to figure out a place to move that would be far enough away that I wasn't immersed in comforting my mom who and dad. My mom and dad were, I don't want to say they weren't a support person for me, but they often were dealing with their own problems with other people who were addicts. So because of that, I didn't feel like my mom and dad were my support, sadly. That's a horrible thing to say. They were beautiful people and they loved me and they did amazing things for me at the time. Amazing. But I don't feel like, and they helped me so much with the move, and they helped me. I don't want to say they, I guess I mean the emotional support that I needed. They needed me to emotionally support them. Let me put it that way. And then I realized that his parents needed me to emotionally support them, because they would call me often and be like, we think he's over here. Can you go, maybe when you're driving home from here, can you drive by this place and see if you see his truck? Can you look for him? They were trying to have me run around and look to make sure if he was with this drug addict, or was he doing drugs here, or where was he living, or what was he doing. They wanted me to be like this, detective, like, what's he doing now? And I couldn't. I was struggling emotionally with the loss of a husband who was my lover, my friend. I was struggling with that loss. That was what hurt me. I was struggling with him being abducted from me by drugs. I was struggling with that I couldn't support them emotionally, even though they needed it, and I had such compassion for them. So anyway, so I knew I needed to move away. That was a no-brainer for me. But how far, I didn't know. And I knew I wanted to be near a city, but I wanted to be not in a city. I wanted to be close to like a bustling life. Cape May County is very, really like country living. Cape May County is like cut off shorts and t shirts and flip flops and beach chairs. And it's like being down south. Your closest mall was like 40 minutes away. And I thought, if I'm going to move, I want to live in a place that's just bustling and beautiful and lively. And I knew I loved these three places. I loved Baltimore County. I love that area outside of Baltimore. There's so many beautiful towns outside of Baltimore. I love that Hudson River area, Tarrytown, like outside of New York City. I also love those two areas. Okay, I think I'll say are the only two areas I was thinking about because I knew my grandmother lived in Baltimore. I thought, well, maybe I could live near my grandmother so I could kind of help her and she could help me. Not that she's a tough cookie to live near because she was a really tough cookie to live near, but she was a person that loved me. But then I had a person reach out to me, a friend from high school. It's not high school, from college. I went to college. I went away to college to Messiah for a year and met beautiful people there. I had great friends and had a friend that stayed my friend for many, many years. Actually, she's still my friend. She's my really, really good friend. And we've gotten closer at times and further apart at times, according to what was happening in both of our lives. But our friendship remains. Not to, I'm really going off on a path here, and it was a good feeling path because I was thinking about my friend. But anyway, so let me get back to the story. I had a friend who lived here in this town of Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, and she kept saying, "Come check out Lancaster." First off, I didn't realize Lancaster even had a city. I thought Lancaster was all Amish people and malls, outlet malls. Because when I would visit her, we did drive into the city for dinner sometimes. I never thought about the city because we kind of avoided the city a little bit when I would visit her. We would, drive through Amish country. We'd go to the outlets shopping. I think she thought, oh, Petra wants to go to the outlets. Also, I often had to buy stuff for the kids. So I would visit her a lot in Lancaster. And I said to her, I said, ew, I do not want to live there. It just smells like cow manure and people just eat ham salad there. I was like, ew, it's stinky. Well, I, she said, no, just check it out. So I'm going to say when you're planning to leave, you might be in a situation where it's dangerous and you have to get out right then. And I can't tell you that's not what I was in. I was in a situation where he left the house and I had some time to stay in the house that I was in. I was very fortunate that way. Didn't stay long. He left the house in January and I was in my new location in 4 months. It took me 4 months to do all that I'm going to tell you I did. But I want you to listen to the feelings that I had. Because the first feeling about all the stuff that I'm planning was I realized I'm not a victim and I needed to assess, okay, number one, assess my resources, right? So I had to assess what I had. I knew I had the ability to get a job in another place. I was a nurse. So nurses can get jobs in other states. I had to figure out where that was going to be because I had to apply for a nursing license in that place that I was going to live, whether it be New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. I knew I wanted to be in a town that had a lot of resources closer to a city. I knew that for one. So I knew all these things. So take what you know. Take what you know is going to be a possibility for you and work it. Work that possibility. So, okay, I told you I wasn't going to tell you what to do, but my thing is I needed to take what I knew and I needed to work my possibilities. And my possibilities were that I could be a nurse somewhere out of Cape May County, away from all the hurt that was in that town. So, anyway, I looked at three things when I was moving, and I suggest doing this if you're a person that has children and you need to move to a place and you're thinking about being your long-term place. I looked at three things. I looked at, as a single woman, I knew I had to have affordable housing and I had to have a house that I could afford. um, I knew I needed to have a school system that was good for my children. It had to be ranked as a good school system. That was my requirement. And then the third thing was I need to have an income, an hourly rate that would support my my being alone with three children. Um, so those were the three things that I needed. So first off, I was very fortunate. I had this beautiful friend. We'll call her Al. Elle lived here in Lancaster, and she gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And she said, "Listen, I know you have to sell that. I know that you." Well, I don't think we're talking about selling the little rental house because I had that little rental house to eventually try to sell. Actually, I didn't know what I was going to have because we hadn't been divorced yet. I didn't know my financial situation yet. But what she said was, "Come live with me in my house. You, your three kids, and your dog." And sadly, the hard thing was I had to get rid of the cats. She would not take my cats. It was really hard. She hated cats. Well, she might be upset with me for saying that right now, but I know she hated cats. So she's like, "You can't bring the cats." And we had two cats that we had adopted. And then we had my dog, who I was not going to get rid of my dog. I had Mako, my Labrador, who I'd had at that point for 10 years. He was my 10-year-old lab, and Mako went everywhere that we went. Mako was going to come wherever I moved. So anyway, so she goes, "If you with three kids and Mako can come move in with me, and we'll do a thing where we'll do a year." Because I said I didn't want to. First off, I'm a very independent woman. I don't want handouts from anybody. So when she offered this to me, I thought, she's nuts. She's gonna be like wishing she didn't offer this if we move in with her. But she's like, "Come live with me in Lancaster. It's a beautiful place. It's a great place to raise a family. Live with me. We'll do a year. We'll do a 1 year limit. No, that way you have to be out in 1 year, and you'll pay all my utilities, and you'll pay all the other bills, and I'll just pay my mortgage, and you come live with me." She was single at the time, and actually, it was kind of neat, the two of us living together, which is a whole nother story in itself. Actually, I could make a really fun podcast about that one. I think I will, because after these three heavy ones, we're going to need a light one. But anyway, so I didn't say yes right away. I really strategically thought about where I wanted to raise my family, and I didn't want to rush into something. But I spent like 3 weekends in a row driving to Lancaster. Me and the kids jumped in the dog, jumped in I had a Ford Explorer truck at Eddie Bauer that I loved. We would jump in that little Eddie Bauer truck, and we would drive um, that weekends and spend the weekends in Lancaster. And I got lost. Didn't have GPS back then. Had a dinky old cell phone that was not much of anything, but had no GPS system. And I would just drive around Lancaster, and the beauty of it just blew my mind. We would go hiking on the weekends. I actually a couple times would leave my kids with my in-laws because they would watch them for like the weekend. We were trying to still get my ex to have visitation with them, and he did show up a couple times to visit them, but he honestly wouldn't show up. He just wouldn't. He wouldn't come. He wouldn't show up, which blew my mind that he didn't. Especially because he went through the same thing when he was a young boy, and I just never thought that he would do that to the kids. But it's not that he did it to them. He was struggling, and maybe he stayed away from the kids for a reason that was better than I give him credit for. Maybe he stayed away because he didn't want to expose them to this lifestyle of drugs. I don't know. I really want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But either way, I was alone sometimes on those weekends when I was exploring with my friend Elle, and we really could explore them because we could do these like long hikes in the woods. Which, if you know me at all and you've listened to any of my other podcasts, or you just know me, you know I love to hike in the woods. I love to immerse myself in nature. I think I could live in a tree house, honestly. I love to be outside so much. So anyway, so we would go these long hikes through these beautiful, beautiful trails. Then we just drive to the country. Then we go out to really nice restaurants in the city and walk through the city. At that time, Lancaster City was not like it is now. If I tell you, it had trash on the floors and there wasn't the element of bustling, evening bustling where you had the downtown lifestyle. The downtown lifestyle was rough. It wasn't what it is now. Now it's it's amazing. I can't even brag about it enough. In the 20, I've lived here for over 20 years now. I can tell you it, and here's another sidebar. We're going off on a tangent. Lancaster City is beautiful and it has a bustling nightlife. Then it didn't. Then she laughed at me because I said, let's take a walk through the city after dinner. And we're walking and like kicking trash on the road. And it just was dirty and nasty. And I was like, ew, this is nasty. But either way, in the daytime, the city was great. We go to market. You know, there were shops there, restaurants at night that were really good. That are still good. The same restaurants that we went to 20 years ago are still there and are still amazing. Um, but anyway, so what I want to tell you is I looked at real estate outside too. I looked at a house in I think it was in Tarrytown area. It was the tiniest little minuscule home. It was like 5 times what I could afford. Now, nursing salary was good if you went into the cities, so the salary was good and the school systems were good. So real estate took that one off my plate. I could never afford to live there, I realized. So that area outside of New York City was off my plate. Baltimore, same thing. The school systems outside and around Baltimore were really good. The nursing pay for the real estate, though, the real estate was expensive, not as expensive as outside of New York City, but the nursing pay wasn't as high as the nursing pay in Lancaster when I looked at it was almost the same as outside Baltimore City. So I ended up looking at nursing pay was high, I felt like then it was fair in Lancaster. The school systems right around Lancaster City, oh my gosh, are just amazing. I really can tell you my kids got a really good education at the school system outside of Lancaster. And then on top of it, real estate. Real estate was the golden ticket. I could not believe how little a large, beautiful house was going to cost me. And of course, I had to get a large, old house because that's what I could afford. But I ended up being able to afford a house, have higher nursing pay. The school systems were good, and that was my logic. I truly was thinking logically. Like everything, every decision I made was logical. I can tell you for my kids. It was really if I didn't have kids, I can tell you I wouldn't have moved to Lancaster City. Lancaster wouldn't have been my option. I probably would have went down south somewhere. I probably would have moved down in South Carolina to that. I loved down there. I loved it. I probably would have moved down there. Um, but because I had 3 kids, I was thinking completely logic. The other thing I had to do was I needed to be close to where um, he was going to live. I didn't think he was going to leave. I didn't think he was going to leave Cape May County. He was actually dating then soon a woman who he ended up marrying. And anyway, so I definitely thought he was going to stay in Cape May County. He ended up leaving Cape May County, but that's okay. That happened a lot later. Not a lot later, but probably a year or two later, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. I have no idea where he was. I think if anybody wanted to write a movie about a person, he would be an interesting person to write a movie about. But either way, he ended up disappearing. I think, and I'm not even kidding when I say he joined the circus. He joined the circus. I'm not even kidding about that. Um, but anyway, my responsibility was I am not a victim. I'm a strong mother. I'm mother of these three children, and I'm going to take care of them. And, they might not know that that's what I was thinking then, because when I moved, I remember moving into my new house and the kids struggling to get adjusted into the school. My kids struggled. They struggled. They were tossed around with different babysitters as I was trying to get settled into this job. They had to be latchkey kids. Um, they they were. I remember when I first moved there, my daughter, my oldest daughter, and she's making me mad at me for saying this because she's a dear, beautiful person. She's non-conflictual. She's kind and sweet and loving, and she's a mother herself now. But I remember she was like 12 years old, which imagine a poor 12-year-old girl being, well, just in this situation herself. The kids went through it too, not just me. They went through it, and I remember yelling at the top of the stairs in our new home after we were there for a while. I hate you, Mom. I hate you. Why did you bring us here? I hate you. And I said, I love you. And it was just like this. It was insane. It was hard. I have no regrets. I have no regrets bringing my children here. But when you're in the midst of it and you're trying to comfort your children and let them believe that, you're trying to be the strong person for them. So that's why I needed to get out of County. And I can tell you, there's other people that might like. What I did again is I want you to know my thought process. Yes, I needed to assess the situation, see what my resources were. I needed to stand up and not be a victim. I needed to be strong, but I also needed to realize how strong I could possibly be. I knew I wasn't strong enough to emotionally support the other people that loved my ex. I knew I needed to get away from them. They didn't know it at the time. They didn't realize it. I think they just thought I was trying to get away from all the drugs that were around me. I don't know what they thought of, but I actually needed to be able to be supported. And when I moved in with that woman, Elle, who was my friend, we that's it was like we were like an odd couple, I'll tell you that much. And she set boundaries for herself, which were healthy because I had three kids. She had to have her single life. She was a drug rep and she was single and she was dating. She wanted to find her forever person, so she was in the midst of dating. I was a man hater and I was helping my three children settle into everything. So my time was with the three kids. The only thing I tried to do for myself at all, ever, when I had the three kids, was I tried to go for runs because that was like my medicine. That was my antidepressant. And I really, when I moved in with Elle, even though I was going through these motions, and I even looked like when I went to work, I remember people like thinking, wow, you're really strong. You moved here with three kids, a single woman, just uprooted by yourself. And I I was strong. When I went to work, I was really strong. I loved my job. I worked so hard at my work and I was like a worker. I loved work. I had no qualms about going to work. I didn't although I might have seemed like I wore my heart on my sleeve, I didn't. People didn't know that I was struggling with depression. People didn't know that when I went home and felt so lonely with my three kids that my head wasn't in a good place for a long time. Actually, I think buying the new house, I bought the house 6 months after I lived in Lancaster. I lived with her. I lived with Elle, who was dear, and her family was amazing. Her family invited me for Thanksgiving dinner. Her friends were amazing. They embraced me as a single woman with three kids, and they embraced me and made me feel loved. But they did it because they loved Elle too. They loved her and they embraced me and they were so kind. But I still felt like a burden. I know it sounds weird. I put myself in that situation with Elle, first being thankful that she gave it to me, but second, feeling embarrassed and feeling ashamed and feeling um, like I wasn't in control of my life at that time until I was able to buy a house. But during that 6 months, I was going through the divorce. I was going through a lot, and it might sound easy, like saying, that, oh yeah, I moved and I got another job and I just started fresh in a good school system with my kids. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't. I had kids that were struggling. I was trying to get them in counseling. They were going to after school programs for new divorced parents. They were crying. The girls were that age that is just so important for a young woman to feel her worth with a man. They say, I read books about raising children, and I knew that that age of 10, 11, 12 for a young woman is how she sees herself in a relationship and with a man. And I just thought, my kids are being so beat up and tossed around right now. And I felt, um, I felt, okay, I'm not going to use the word victimized. I felt um, overwhelmed and sad and frightened. There you go. That's how I felt. Um, but I also thought logically, and I wasn't a victim. So uh, I held on to that statement that that doctor told me in the office when I first went to her and told her I was thinking about antidepressants, but I didn't want to take them, but I might need them because I was going through finding out all this stuff about my ex. But that statement that she said, you can live with addiction or you can live after addiction. And my motto was, I'm living after addiction. And I didn't cut him off. I tried to take the kids to see him. I tried to find him when he was missing so that my kids could know where he was. I tried to arrange for them to see him at all times, even if it was supervised, which he might not have understood at the time or times, but I needed I needed my kids to not be around people using drugs. And I had already watched a lot of other people's children be around people who use drugs. And I knew it wasn't fair for those kids. And I knew I wasn't going to have my kids in that situation. And I knew that I'm not, you know, I can't watch my kids everywhere they go. And I actually taught my children when they were little. I went to asked a lot of counselors for my kids. I never went to counseling for myself actually till like I was over 50 years old. I never even took antidepressants or went to counseling during all that time, which I, looking back now, for me was okay because I did run. Kind of happy I didn't. I mean, I'm not saying antidepressants are bad because trust me, they're amazing and people need them. But at that time, I'm kind of happy I didn't go on them because I needed that fierce energy and I needed that emotion and I needed that drive to keep me going. It sounds weird. Even though I'd come home and deflate and just be in my head and be depressed, I needed that for that time in my life to have energy and I needed to go through those emotions. But I needed that. I don't know if everybody does. So for me, stand up and redo is don't be a victim. Don't be a victim. Do what you can within your means to help yourself, and don't let children be around people using drugs. I'm going to say that point blank, and that's how I feel about it. If there are people doing drugs in your house, don't have your kids near it. Don't have your kids around it. Don't let your kids be around it. Please, don't leave your kids there. Please, get them out of that situation. That's how I feel. And that was a story that didn't know how I was going to share, but I'm happy I did. I don't regret this, and I hope that it helped you. I'm sorry if it didn't, but I hope it helped you. I hope so. And my stand up and redo is don't be a victim. Don't be a victim. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to give credit to Sarah Gephardt for the cover page of this podcast. This podcast is a work based on the personal experiences, reflections, and memories of the speaker. The events described are true to the best of the speaker's knowledge and recollection. Some names, locations, identifying characteristics, and timelines have been changed or altered to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. In some cases, composite characters have been created or dialogue has been reconstructed based on memory. The intention of this podcast is not to defame, malign, or harm any individual or entity. Rather, it is to share the speaker's journey with honesty, vulnerability, and integrity. Any opinions expressed are solely those of the speaker and are not intended as statements of fact regarding any person, group, or organization. Listeners should keep in mind that human memory is inherently subjective and selective, and while every effort has been made to ensure accuracy, this podcast reflects the speaker's perspective and truth. Thank you.